Hello and welcome once again from Barcelona to another Armory event that took place here. This is round number one, and we're having some classic constructed action this time. We see we've got Chane versus Prism, so we've got two of the new Monarch heroes, and those are, I believe, two of the most popular heroes in the constructed format currently, with Chane maybe having slightly more success and representation, but Prism also being very popular and seeing a lot of success as well. So we see Chane managed to win the die roll and chooses to do what Chane usually does, which is to create a rune chant using his gloves, and then he is looking to maybe push some damage. A lot of the time you're just going to put something in arsenal, but this time he actually drew a Vexing Malice, so that means he's going to be doing some arcane damage, since on the other side we do not see any null rune equipment to block this, and so that means he's going to be dealing at least 3 arcane damage, which is very nice for the first turn, getting to deal some damage. And as we can see, not only did he draw one, he actually drew 2 Vexing Malices, but he chooses instead to use his go again to attack with a Nebula Blade. So obviously you should full block this, in my opinion, which does not happen, I believe. Oh no, it does happen, because there was no attack action played. And then we've got a Sigil of Solace being played. So while Chane had a really good first turn, there was still not really any life lost, or just 1 life lost. So things working out pretty okay for both players here. And Chane gets to obviously make a Soul Shackle and set up for the next turn. So when it comes to this matchup, I think it is an interesting one, because there are different ways to play. Looking at, in general, if you want to beat Chane, I think the 2 ways you can do it is either by trying to fatigue him or by trying to race him down. And I believe that Prism, depending on how you build your deck, can actually do either. Now, what we see here is a Herald of Judgment, a very strong card against Chane in particular, because it prevents cards being played from the banish zone if it hits. However, I'm personally not a big fan of using it this early on, because there's not going to be a lot of blood debt being flipped over, and you're actually not going to be preventing a whole lot of action, and this card can actually be a complete backbreaker in the later stages of the game, especially if the Chane has already used equipment that for blocking, and maybe if you have a pommel in hand or some other attack reaction that you can use in order to push through, and you can really punish the Chane player in that way. But that being said, it did force a reaction here. There were some cards used from hand to block this, and then the follow-up Herald did end up connecting for some damage. So not too bad for the first real turn of the Prism player. But going back to what the Prism can do is, you can either try to kind of fatigue and use play some auras and kind of poke the Chane player down, play defensively, and use a lot of defense reactions and that kind of stuff, trying to fatigue him. Or you can, what I think is probably the more successful strategy, at least in my opinion, but I'm not a Prism player, so don't take it, take it with a grain of salt what I'm saying here, and just go full aggro, play a bunch of heralds and try to use the pommels to really push some damage and pressure the hand of the Chane player, just trying to race him down really hard. And that can work really well, because Chane usually is not running a whole lot of 6 or 7 power attacks to break your phantasms. So you get to lean on your cards being kind of above curve in the sense of you're paying less resources than you should be for that kind of effect, for the amount of attack damage that they do. But we can see here this looks to be a bit of a hybrid list, so we actually have a pretty awkward hand here being drawn. You've got like a bunch of auras and a time snap potion, which I don't really love so much in this matchup either. The time snap potion, that is, I think that is actually something you want to play against Prism specifically, because that means you get to destroy an aura and still be able to do something to attack the enemy hero as well. And against Chane, I don't think it's going to do a whole lot, because you can just use your Luminaris to give your attacks go again, and just kind of like pummel and just kind of like attack multiple times a turn in that way. So you don't really need the time snap potion that much. That being said, however, and this is like a typical thing with our playgroup, we see that the Prism player does not have access to the legendary boots, so the legendary equipment is sometimes missing, which means that he doesn't really have, if the Phantasm is being broken, he doesn't really have anything to do about it, and so in that sense the time snap potion might be more useful, so in order to make sure that you actually get to attack multiple times a turn. However, what we see here, so there was an aura being played, and it was then swiftly destroyed by Chane after creating another soul shackle, and some damage was being dealt as well. So maybe not the best, but again maybe not the worst either. He didn't take that much damage on this turn. But now, unfortunately, the momentum obviously has shifted dramatically in Chane's favor. So usually going second means you get to pressure, but if you draw a hand like he does, there's not really much you can do in terms of pressuring here, just because it's just not really an aggressive hand that you can come back with strong. So instead, what he's forced to do is to just say, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna put the last card that I had in my hand into the arsenal, and then see to maybe not block as much on this next turn, and see what I can do from there. So Chane did not flip anything of significance on his turn now, and he's currently considering the way that he wants to approach this. So with Chane you always have like sequencing is extremely important, and you usually have like a lot of options available on your turn, and in order to kind of maximize the damage output that you can do. So it looks like he has kind of some extra resources floating around, because he's going to activate his Grasp of the Arknight, which usually means that he kind of has more resources than he knows what to do with, or is kind of like missing some way to give go again. Or I believe maybe he has a Rip Through Reality in hand, and that might be a reason to try and deal arcane damage right now, because then the Rip would have go again naturally, although I'm not sure if he would then be able to even play anything else afterwards, just because of the amount of resources it takes to do that, or yeah, I mean, he always gets to use the Soul Shackle anyways to give go again, and so in that sense, in order to profit from this extra go again, he would need yet another attack, and I think maybe the resources might not be there. So it is a Rip Through Reality. It's coming in with 1 arcane damage from the Grasp of the Arknight rune chant. So I'm not sure if he did choose to activate the Soul Shackle before, and one interesting thing is, if he didn't, since the Seeds of Agony is not active here, it's just the yellow seeds, one option that the Prism player would have had was to pitch 2 resources, instant speed, to create a Soul Shield. To create one of those the tokens, I forget what they're called, and actually prevent the arcane damage, and thus prevent the go again. And I think that might have been an opportunity that was missed here, because that would completely stop the Chane's turn in his tracks and even prevent him from creating another Soul Shackle, so that would have been a pretty big deal. And I think the correct play, unless I'm mistaken and he actually made that, would have been on the Chane side to just go ahead and say, whatever, I'm just going to make a Soul Shackle anyways, there's no need for me to kind of like activate, if you will, the rip through reality. Now this is interesting, and I believe this might just be something where we have some inexperience here, because so the Prism player is choosing to play a Tome of Fjendel from Arsenal, but I believe it does not have Go Again. So that means that while he gets to draw cards and gain some life, he then can't do anything with those cards, right? I mean, he does have a Sigil of Solace, so he gets to gain some life. He can put something in Arsenal, but obviously the ideal thing you want to do is, with a Tome of Fjendel, you want to do something about you want to use the cards that you have. Okay, you can make or Spectral Shield, that's what it's called. You can create a Spectral Shield, but you actually obviously want to follow up with an attack, or even better, follow up with 2 attacks. I mean, you're having like a 5-card hand, so you want to do something with it. And if you don't have any way to give the Tome of Fjendel Go Again, so usually that would be kind of like with the Mage Master Boots, maybe that's the kind of the classic Bravo way of doing it. Then in the sense you're actually wasting it, because now you're just stuck with 2 cards left in your hand that you didn't use to block with, that you didn't use to attack with, and you're not really setting anything specific up on your next turn. So you're kind of wasting resources here. So that's very unfortunate, and that might come back to haunt him. We see Chane finally manages to flip over his first Blood Dead card, so he actually has now the option to play something from his banish zone if he so chooses. He considers something. He says, okay, I'm going to make a Soul Shackle first. Now I'm going to pitch after making playing Seeds of Agony, and now he's actually doing just that. He's playing an Unhallowed Rites from the Vanish Zone, and this one is coming in, I believe, for 2 arcane damage and 2 physical damage, and he gets to put a most likely Seeds of Agony on the bottom of his deck, which he is going to do right now. So yes, 2 arcane, 2 physical. I believe the one of the arcane is just going to be blocked by the Spectral Shield token, and then the 2 physical you can choose to block or not. Maybe you don't really want to do that because 2 damage is not that much, but what we have here is the consideration to use the headgear. Okay, he's going to take 2. I believe that's a mistake, because he should have this should have destroyed the Spectral Shield instead. And he's actually going to use a Sink Below here. I am also not the biggest fan of this line right now, because I believe that's a red Sink Below, so that's blocking for 4, and we know that most likely Chane is going to come in with a Nebula Blade, and that's at least, right? And that's one of the, maybe not the scariest hit trigger, but it's certainly a scary hit trigger, and with the defense faction you can actually prevent it. And you actually get to prevent 4 damage instead of just 2, which you're doing right now. And then also some chain lists are playing even scarier hit triggers, like Consuming Volition, for example, Meet and Greet, where you really want to block, especially the Consuming Volition, you really want to block that if you took some arcane damage on that turn. So keeping a defense reaction in hand against Chane can be very, very crucial. So we see exactly what's happening right now. The Nebula Blade is coming in, and I think he might be wishing he had the Sink Below right now, because that would be an easy block here. So instead he's kind of like considering his options, looking at a 2 block in hand as well that he drew from the Sink. So that's kind of like we have to kind of consider what we're going to do here. And I believe he's got a Phantasmaclasm and a 3-pitch in hand, so maybe what you want to do is just say, okay, whatever, I'm just going to, block 2 damage here. It's not ideal, but whatever. And then I'm going to come back with a Phantasmaclasm on my next turn, just a big-ass 9-point attack, which is most likely going to go through. And now actually they notice the error with the soul with the Spectral Shield, so that's being fixed. That's great. And the Chane player chooses to Arsenal card and actually keep a card in hand, and that is the card that he kept, is a 9th Blade. So that's a way to actually pop Phantasm. And maybe this is being kind of like sniffed out. Okay, he says, well, you keep one card in hand, that's very suspicious. I'm actually going to pop my Dreamweavers here and make sure that this attack is not being destroyed by a large attack. However, I'm also not entirely sure whether I love this play, because the Phantasmaclasm kind of, in a way, protects itself from being destroyed, because you get to look at your opponent's hand and choose if you find one card, and you get to choose and put it to the bottom. He still does that here. Also a play I'm not entirely in love with, because maybe the thing you want to do is actually, since you're using your gloves, you actually get to say, well, whatever, you get to keep the big attack, because it's not really useful for you realistically, and I get to take maybe like a resource card from your hand, or something that you kind of like, or like a power card, trying to kind of like mess up your turn. However, it kind of works out well for him, because he would have the Chane player would have drawn a Command and Conquer. So using the gloves was actually a good idea. Otherwise, this Phantasmaclasm would have just been destroyed. And now we see Chane actually decided to say, okay, I'm going to just take this damage, and that's obviously, just 9 damage being taken. So now I would be very worried if I'm on the other side, because that means he's got big and nasty plans, and indeed he does. We can see there was a Plunder Run from Arsenal, just a blue one, but still, and then another Plunder Run, as well as 2 Soul Shackles. So this time the flips were like a lot better. I believe. Apologies, 2 Seeds of Agony. Now he's making a Soul Shackle, and now he's coming in with a Riftbind, a huge Riftbind, of course. And so there's 2 arcane damage being dealt, and then this Riftbind is coming in for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I believe. So, oof, that's a big attack. And if it hits, he gets to draw 2 cards as well, and it does go again. So that is extremely scary. And now you really have to consider, can I kind of block this out? Is there a way for me to get around those nasty Plunder Runs? And I believe this is going to be a very difficult thing indeed. But maybe there is a way to do this. If you just throw your entire hand at it and hope for the best. But the chances of, you already know, at least there's like a Ghostly Visit waiting in the Banish Zone, so most likely that's going to come, and then the Snapdragon Scales are going to be used, and you are going to be in a lot of trouble with 2 extra cards drawn, and we'll see how this one pans out. So he takes the arcane damage, and now for the physical hit, that's the kind of the important one. We actually see, I believe it's called Impenetrable Belief, and so there were 4 cards flipped, I believe, which means that it is not blocking for 4 yet, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's just a block for 8, which makes perfect sense. So that would actually block the entire attack, so this is probably. Means that he's going to say he's going to try to prevent the Plunder Run hits, but I think unless he has a defense reaction Arsenal, which I don't believe he does, I don't think there's any way for him to stop the unhit triggers that are going to come his way with the Ghostly Visit, or maybe the whatever else is in hand here. So we'll see what happens. 2 cards being used, 2 resources being used. Okay, a Command and Conquer. So on the one hand, obviously you're not happy to be hit with a Command and Conquer, but on the other hand, this means that the hit triggers don't matter actually, because there's no way, or most likely there's no way for the Chane to give the Command and Conquer go again. And so that means, yes, you're going to take 6 damage, yes, you're going to use your Arsenal, yes, he's going to draw 2 cards, but he doesn't get to use those 2 cards, because that's just the end of the turn, right? There's no way to keep going. And we see he actually drew a Shadow Puppetry. So if we imagine, say, he comes in with a Ghostly Visit, and it hits, and he gives it go again with the Snapdragon Scalers. He then gets to go, Shadow Puppetry, Command and Conquer, and maybe follow up with yet another thing. That might have been an insane turn. But this way, it was quote unquote just 6 damage being dealt, the arsenal being destroyed. So obviously still great for Chane, but not as bad as it could have been. On the other hand, of course, big upside for Chane is now he still has access to his boots. So what this means is basically that the big scary turn is just going to be maybe a little later on down the line. So what we see here is an attempt to at least put some pressure back with the Blue Herald from hand. And I believe you played off of the chest, and I believe this is also maybe a small misplay here, because I think he blocked with a yellow or red herald before. So if you're going to play, if your plan is to just play one of your heralds from hand anyways, maybe you'd be better with your chest. You would be better served to to keep a red herald in hand rather than a blue herald, so you're doing more damage. But again, we don't know. Maybe his plan was to use the resources, and he just got screwed by his arsenal being blown up. So that might be another reason as well. But even still, it is the way it is. And now we see, I think he drew another kind of unfortunate hand. We see 2 more instances, so like one of the aura and then a glisten. Which is maybe not the best in this spot here, because now Chane is really starting to do his thing. He's flipping 5 cards over. He actually hit 4, I believe he hit 3 cards with Blood Dead, and now things are going to be even more difficult. And what we see here right away, this is an attack for 8, go again, and with a non-hit trigger that's maybe not as scary, but is still pretty relevant. He gets to look at the top card, maybe banish it due to the Shadow Puppetry. So this really is going to put on a lot of pressure on the Prism player right here, who's already down on life, down on tempo, and looking at a hand where, once again, I feel like, can you really say, okay, I'm going to tank this damage and come back hard at you? Because you don't really have much to come back hard. You see a Tome of Fiendal, there's no way to give it go again once again. So that's not really going to do much of anything. It doesn't block really well. You're looking at 2 instants in your hand and a 2 block one, with a Tome, and it doesn't really attack very well because you've got a Herald, a Blue Herald only in hand, and that's kind of like the only way that you have to attack. That's a really awkward hand. So we'll see what he's going to do with it. He says he decides to block 3 damage, so he's going to take 5, and there's going to be a hit trigger. And I believe this, when he flips over yet another Seeds of Agony, that's obviously a great hit for Chane. And I believe this game is slipping away from Prism more and more. I think now what we're going to see is a bunch of Seeds of Agony played from the banish zone. He's actually, so he's looking to really do some big things now. He says, okay, I'm going to use my equipment, I'm going to make another Soul Shackle, and I'm going to swing with a sword first of all, which I actually really like, because you're going to do it anyways, and if that's your plan, then you might as well kind of conceal a bit of information on what else you're going to do, because you say you still get to keep 2 cards, like your 2 cards in your hand, and that might make it a bit more difficult for the Prism player to reach a decision on how to block this. Well, he says, I'm just going to take the 4 also, because he can't really do anything about it. I guess he could block 4 with a Tome and then pitching something for using his boots, but that's really awkward. So we see Seeds of Agony being played, and now we see yet another Ghostly Visit. So this is coming in for 4+2 because of the rune chant that was created earlier with the Nebula Blade and the Seeds of Agony that was found, and he gets to keep 1 card in hand, which he's most likely going to just put into his arsenal afterwards, unless he actually has another attack that costs 1 or less, and he wants to use his Snapdragon Scalers at this spot, which might be, is very well a possibility. So what we see here now is actually what I kind of alluded to earlier. Or it is quote unquote just a block with the boots. I mean, sure, may as well use them at some point. I might have been, again, I think you're in a really rough spot either way, but I might have preferred to say and go, I'm going to use the Toma Fiendel and the boots in order to block the Nebula Blade, because then you're preventing the hit trigger as well. But I mean, at this point, I don't know. I think it's just going to be tough either way. So we see Chane says, "All right, I'm going to use my boots to deal an extra 3 points of damage with one of my cards from hand." This one, I'm not sure I like so much, because your boots are like a really big resource, and they're also kind of like a threat. Just having them on the table is already kind of like scary for your opponent, and the fact that you only kind of cash them in, quote unquote, cash them in for 3 damage. I mean, obviously your opponent doesn't really have much life left, so any damage you can just deal him is going to be great. But I don't know. I think you can kind of like get more out of your boots. But either way, they still kind of like serve the purpose. And now we see a Tome of Fiendel being played from hand. This is actually a mistake. He should not be gaining life here. And we kind of have the same problem that we had before. Yes, you get to play the Tome of Fiendel. Yes, you get to draw cards. But what are you going to do with it then? There's no go again, so you're kind of just drawing extra cards, but you're not really doing anything with it. So yeah, I think maybe there is some consideration on. I don't know if this is just kind of like a deck building error, or maybe if this is something where he just didn't draw the key cards that he needed to draw. But yeah, it just doesn't really work out for him. And now we see on the other side, very, very nasty business. Art of War, and we see a Soul Reaping in hand. Oh my god, this turn is going to be disgusting, and I believe that might just spell the end of it. If not this turn, then most likely next turn is going to be the last, because Chane is just so far ahead. There's even if you do draw like a good attacking hand now on Prism, the likelihood of you being able to keep cards in hand now is very low, because you're only on 8 life. So there's so much tempo advantage. And now Chane has played an Art of War. I believe maybe his second mode was Go Again. Maybe it was +1/+1, I don't know. We'll see it later on. But even still, it's just such a strong card in Chane. And again, as I said, he drew the Soul Reaping. So that's, nasty, nasty business. So this is interesting once again. So if, obviously Soul Reaping an extremely strong card, especially if your opponent has like some cards in his soul. But the interesting thing is, if the Art of War mode was not Go Again, then we might have the same trick again, where you can actually instant speed create a Spectral Shield, and thus you don't actually have cards in your soul anymore. And then when the Soul Reaping resolves after the attack is done, it doesn't have Go Again, and that would completely wreck the Chane here, completely stop his turn, and have him actually take 5 damage to Blood Debt. But I do believe that he was aware of that, the Chane player that is, and actually chose the Go Again mode on the Art of War. And that means that there's not much you can do about this, and this is just a 6 Go Again, and the only thing you can do is block. Okay, so they notice actually the error from before, that the Tome of Fiendel should not have gained life. So the life total is updated, he's actually at 6, and that means that he's staring at a lethal attack right here. And so, you have to block this. I think he has like some cards in hand. I see like I think 3 Heralds, and then there's this Impenetrable Belief, so he has access to 13 block in hand. Not the worst, but once again, I think looking at the what the Chane is going to be doing this turn, there's a very good chance you're just going to be forced to block with your entire hand. And then it's kind of like and you're probably still going to take some damage, and then it's like a downward spiral from there, even if you're not just outright killed on this turn, which is a very real possibility. So he's really considering what to do with this. I think in this spot you might want to say, I'm just going to block 3 damage here, because it doesn't have an on-hit trigger. Obviously you have to block it, but maybe you don't full block it, because maybe there's like scarier stuff coming later with on-hit triggers. But he says, alright, I'm just going to block 6. Again, at this point I don't think it's going to matter all that much, but we'll see how it plays out. Okay, we've got Seas of Agony red being played from the banish zone, and now we create a Soul Shackle. So the next attack is going to have Gorgon once again. There are still floating resources from the pitch as well as the Soul Reaping, and we have a Ghostly Visit. Okay, so this is coming in for 4+1. You probably have to, or you have to block this, otherwise you're just dead to arcane damage. And now we have, I think the Chane might be out of ways to give Gorgon, or did he deal, oh no, he did deal, oh that's nasty, yeah, he did deal arcane damage, so this Rip Through Reality has Gorgon naturally, and then there's like another 3-point attack coming afterwards, so I think that's just going to be the end. He's blocking, he should be blocking 4 here, and so that means he should actually not be dead. At this point he should just take 2, but I believe that it doesn't really matter either way. The Chane player also would have had the option to, instead of attacking with the last card from Banish, to just use his weapon to finish the Prism off. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next round.